I can still picture the Great Plains in the heart of winter. The wind never seems to stop. It screams across miles of white land, carrying a cold that bites straight through bone. The air freezes everything it touches, and there is not a single tree or rock big enough to block that icy breath. Out here, the only shelter you have is what you can raise yourself, right there on the open ground. No warm chimneys puffing smoke into the sky, no cozy homes with central heating. Just a ceiling of stars above and a thin tent wall standing between you and the kind of cold that could end a man's life before dawn. For countless generations, the Native American tribes called this land home. They lived in tipis, those tall, cone-shaped tents made from animal hides stretched tight over wooden poles. To someone seeing them for the first time, they might have looked delicate, almost temporary, like a place you could pack up and move within an hour. But the truth is, those simple structures could withstand winters so fierce that an unprepared traveler might not make it through a single night. Entire families, men, women, and children, slept inside, kept alive through storms that could freeze rivers solid. I often wondered how they managed it. How did they survive nights when the wind howled like wolves and the snow piled higher than a horse's belly? What kind of wisdom and skill did it take to stay warm with nothing more than hides, sticks, and fire? The secret was not luck, it was design. Smart, practical, ingenious design. The teepee was more than just a tent. It was a masterpiece of survival. Every detail, from the way the fire pit sat low in the center, to the way the smoke escaped through a vent at the top, served a purpose. The hides trapped heat while allowing air to flow, keeping smoke out but warmth in. Even the way people slept, huddled close, sharing stories and body heat, was part of the system. This is the story of how the teepee became more than shelter. It became proof that with enough skill, courage, and community, human beings could turn the harshest wilderness into a livable home. To really grasp how Native Americans managed to stay warm through those brutal winters, I first had to understand the teepee itself. That thing was no haphazard tent thrown together in a hurry. It was built with precision. Every pole, every hide, every angle had a reason behind it. Strong wooden poles formed the frame, leaning together to create a perfect cone. Over that skeleton, buffalo hides, later sometimes canvas, were wrapped tight and secured to the frozen earth so no wind could sneak in underneath. And that cone shape? It was genius. The wind could whip across the plains all it wanted, but the teepee sliced right through it. While square houses groaned, rattled, and leaked cold air through their corners, the teepee stood calm, letting the gusts glide harmlessly around its sides. Even heavy snow had no chance to weigh it down. It slid right off, keeping the structure light and steady. Inside, the circular floor plan worked just as cleverly. Warmth didn't pool in one corner or vanish through cracks. It spread evenly around the space. Right in the center sat the heart of it all, a small fire pit glowing with life. The smoke rose gently in a spiral, drawn upward through a vent at the peak, where two flaps could be adjusted depending on the weather. During the winter, those flaps were angled just right, to trap the heat inside while still letting the smoke escape. It was a natural heating and ventilation system rolled into one, the kind that many modern cabins still have trouble perfecting. The teepee wasn't just a shelter. It was a masterpiece of thermal engineering, shaped and perfected through generations of people who refused to let the cold win. The fire inside wasn't only for cooking or light, it was survival itself. Built low in the central pit, it gave off a steady, comforting heat that rose through the cone, bouncing gently off the hides to warm the air. The real skill came in managing that fire. Too big, and smoke would sting your eyes and choke your lungs. Too small, and the cold would creep in like a thief. The vent flaps up above worked like a kind of ancient thermostat, drawing in air just enough to keep the flames breathing right. And when the night grew deep and sleep called, the fire wasn't left to die. Families banked the glowing embers under a thin blanket of ash so that by morning, one good stir would wake the fire back up again. The teepee, in truth, never went cold. Even in silence, the fire lived on. I imagine lying there on a bed of pine and fir branches, hearing the soft crackle of wood in the darkness. The air is cold enough to make my breath visible, but it warms as the flames dance higher, pushing back the endless night. For the tribes who lived on those plains, The fire was not just a comfort. It was life itself. Without it, dawn might never come. Because out there, the worst enemy of warmth wasn't the wind that screamed above. It was the frozen earth beneath. The ground itself was the real enemy. Frozen earth has a way of stealing warmth right out of your body, the way a sponge soaks up water. You could build the strongest fire in the world, but if you slept straight on the ground, that cold would creep into your bones before morning. The Native Americans knew this better than anyone, and they solved it in a way that was both simple and brilliant by layering. The first layer was always the base. They spread brush, reeds, or woven willow mats to lift their bedding off the bare soil. That alone made a huge difference. On top of that, they added thick buffalo hides, bundles of fir branches, or woven mats made from reeds. Later, some used blankets of pine boughs or whatever the land offered. These weren't soft beds made for comfort, they were part of a survival system. Each layer trapped air, creating a cushion of insulation between the sleeper and the frozen earth below. Kids usually slept closest to the floor, nestled deep in hides and furs, while the adults formed a ring around the fire, sometimes resting on slightly raised bedding to share and circulate heat. No one ever lay straight on the ground. They all understood that warmth started from beneath, not above. Funny thing is, modern campers still follow the same rule. We call it a sleeping pad now, but the principle hasn't changed one bit. The tipi itself carried that same wisdom. It was covered in buffalo hides for a reason. Buffalo skin, with its thick fur and heavy fibers, was nature's own insulation. Tough against wind, and perfect for holding in heat. Out on the open plains, where the wind could cut through a man like a knife, that hide was a shield. Inside, families bundled up in layers of fur and hide, wrapping themselves in cloaks made from deer, elk, or buffalo. Each layer trapped warm air, working the same way modern winter jackets do today. Even when the hides were damp from melting snow or mist, they still kept warmth better than cloth could. And unlike woven fabrics, they didn't let the wind through. Together, the fire, the hides, the careful layers of bedding, all formed a kind of living cocoon. It wasn't just comfort. It was survival. What we call insulation now, they simply called life. Today we rely on synthetic fleece and down jackets to do the same job, but the old ways worked every bit as well. Out there on the bitter plains, those people didn't just fight the cold, they outsmarted it. Or the Native Americans, the buffalo meant far more than food on the table. It was warmth, shelter, and life itself. In a way, that animal was their central heating system. But survival on the plains was never something done alone. It was a shared effort. Whole families, sometimes even several generations, would sleep together inside one teepee. Picture it. A dozen people or more, gathered close under heavy hides, with a steady fire glowing in the center. Between the body heat of the group, the thick buffalo skins, and that careful balance of flames, they created their own little world of warmth, a pocket of comfort in the middle of a freezing storm. The sleeping arrangements were practical and full of care. Children were placed between adults so that warmth radiated around them. Infants, wrapped snug in fur, were often nestled between their parents' bodies to stay safe from the cold. The elders, whose bones ached the most from the chill, were always kept closest to the fire. Sure, it was cramped. Privacy was nearly non-existent. But when the wind howled outside and the snow pressed heavy on the plains, no one was thinking about personal space. Warmth was all that mattered. Togetherness wasn't just comforting. It was survival itself. Today, survival experts call it shared body heat. Back then, it was simply how you lived. The teepee's design made that kind of life possible because it was built to adapt. At the very top, the smoke flaps worked like ancient technology. Depending on the wind and weather, they could be opened wide, tilted at an angle, or nearly shut tight. On calm nights, those flaps were pulled close to trap the heat inside. But when the wind picked up, they were adjusted to create a perfect draft, enough to draw the smoke upward while keeping the warmth below. Even the walls themselves were smart. In the summer, the hides could be rolled upward to let air flow freely through the tent. In the winter, they were dropped tight and sometimes lined with extra hides inside, forming a thin pocket of air between layers. just like the insulation in a modern house or the space between double-pane windows. Every choice, every adjustment, came from deep experience with the land. This was not just a place to sleep. It was a living, breathing system of balance between fire, air, and human warmth. A natural form of climate control, created long before electricity or thermostats existed. All of it came from the same wisdom passed down through countless generations who had learned, by necessity, how to live in rhythm with the elements. If there is one lesson in all of it, it is this: survival doesn't come from the newest gadget or the most advanced material. It comes from understanding the principles, how heat moves, how air flows, and how people stay warm together. The old ways still have plenty to teach us, if we are willing to listen. If there was one thing those old tribes understood better than anyone, it was how to work with the world, not against it. They knew the rules of survival by heart. Insulate the ground beneath you, trap warm air in layers, tend your fire with care, and never forget that people themselves are a source of heat. The Native Americans did not fear winter, they respected it. They had studied it, lived alongside it, and learned exactly what it demanded. To me, the tipi was more than just a shelter. It was a machine built from the simplest parts: wood, hide, and flame. Yet it worked with a kind of wisdom that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. But beyond the structure and the clever design, it carried something deeper. It held memory. It held ritual. It held the ingenuity of countless generations who survived not by fighting nature, but by understanding it. These days, with our thermostats and heated blankets, we have drifted away from that knowledge. We take warmth for granted, forgetting that, for most of human history, survival depended on skill, not switches. But if those modern comforts were to vanish, the lessons of the tipi would still stand strong. Keep your design simple. Build your fire with intention. Stay close to others when the cold comes. Those principles could still save a life today. So, how did the Native Americans sleep through those deadly winters without freezing to death? They mastered the art of insulation. They layered hides and furs to trap every bit of heat. They shared body warmth, using togetherness as their most powerful tool. And they treated the tipi not as a temporary shelter, but as a living machine built for survival. I have to ask, what part of that amazes you most? Was it the clever way they controlled airflow, the way they insulated the floor from the frozen earth, or the warmth that came from a dozen hearts beating close together through the night? I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoyed walking with me through this bit of forgotten wisdom, go ahead and share it with someone who thinks they could rough it outdoors, someone who might not last a single night in a teepee. Give it a like, pass it on, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because the truth is, the past still has plenty to teach us. Sometimes it knows far more about staying alive than the modern world ever will.